share away, let us know who you are, where you've been, and what you're doing now.
So a lot of the folks on the call know who I am, but for the folks who don't, I have 3 degrees in advertising, marketing, and psychology. I got my advertising and marketing degrees at Texas Tech. I got my psychology degree at UNT, and then I got out and was waiting tables. And I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. And so I had a conversation with my wife, and I said, honey, I can be, a voice actor, or I could be an actor, I could do all these things, animator. And she goes, listen, I don't care what you do. Just pick something and do it. And so I said, fine, animation. So back then it was pre-internet-ish. And so I got the phone book, went through the phone book, called every animation company in Dallas, and everybody says, sorry, we don't even do tours, go away. And I finally got to L for a company called Light and Shadows Graphics. And the guy said, come on in. So I had a portfolio, I was so excited. I went in there and I said, so, when can I start? And he goes, oh, sorry, no, we don't have anything for you. I just remember how tough it was. And so I made a vow that anytime any student or anybody reached out to me, I'd at least make time for a meeting. And I said, okay, thanks. And I was prepared to start with M through Z. I didn't know what was going to happen if I got to Z and nothing happened. But a week later, they called me and they said, hey, Jay, we have a gig that popped up you'd be perfect for because your cartoons that you drew, it doesn't pay anything, but it's for the US Post Office. And would you mind doing it? And I said, sure. And that was the first animation piece I did in the mid 90s. And back then I was working as a psych tech at a mental health hospital. I was waiting tables and I was a substitute teacher. So fast forward, I have made money as an animator, cartoonist, designer, illustrator, writer, director, producer, developer, even got paid as a photographer. And currently I'm a design strategist at Sabre. So when you see all these sticky notes on my profile, anything I have an interest in, I find a way to kind of get paid to do. My problem is not having enough opportunities. My problem is figuring out which one I want to focus in on. And so that's kind of the story a little bit of my life, but it's been a fun, interesting ride. So that's my short version.
Thank you, Jay. Yeah. Anybody have questions for Jay out the gate?
I don't have any questions. Sabre was one of my target companies, but they haven't hired me since I've been down here, so I had to skip over them.
Yeah, they're on a hiring freeze right now, I think, except for certain things. So just FYI.
Well, I know that it's hard to get in unless you know somebody there, and right now I'm trying to pursue my certs to get the certs, but as soon as I get them out of the way, I'm going to try to see if I can get back over to Sabre.
I would definitely do Google Cloud training. Is my 2 cents for you.
Okay.
Yep, that's a great advice. Okay, so Alan, should we switch over to you really quick so you can let everybody know who you are, where you've been,
Sure.
what you're doing now?
So ironic that you should ask for background and a little bit of history, because yesterday I was part of a group that was being trained to do work on the platform of the sanctuary of our church, and it was kind of training in stage presence and whatnot. And so they said, get up there and try three different ways to present, where you were born, and let's see, a fact that nobody knows about you or something like that. And so I didn't, as it turns out, we ran out of time, but I figured out what I was going to say. I was going to say that I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, the home of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And a little known fact was, when I was 16 years old, I cut my first record as a songwriter and singer. And a DJ in Cleveland said he wanted to make me a rock and roll star. And I thought that sounds like a way to get deep trouble. So I wound up becoming a lawyer.
Wow.
But I have rekindled my interest in music, and now have done, a number of pretty nice songs and recordings done, and that's my I'm not going to do it as a profession, but it's a pretty active thing for me, and I love it dearly.
Mhm.
So the lawyer route was pretty standard. I went to a good law school and practiced law with a White Shoes law firm for a number of years, and then eventually decided that really wasn't quite the personality fit for me, because the practice of law, at least as it was in that firm, tended to be kind of there's room for creativity, but you're still operating within a set of constraints of the way lawyers kind of work and think. So I got an MBA at the University of Chicago and became an investment banker. Came down to Dallas, ran the corporate finance department of a regional investment banking firm, and I have been an entrepreneur for now a number of years, usually with a bit of a financial angle to it, but not necessarily. But a number of different industries, everything from investment research, investment management. I've owned some magazines, and right now I'm focused on sustainability, or ESG. Are all of you familiar with those terms? Or is there anybody who isn't?
I mean, I can see it right here on your profile, environmental, social, and governance, but I'm sure we'd all like to understand that a little bit better if you'd like to explain a little bit about it.
Sure. ESG is sometimes called sustainability. They're not exactly the same thing, but pretty much the same thing. And it's a movement, or it's not a very well defined thing, but it really, in the E stands for environmental, the S stands for social, and G stands for governance. And it's a set of 3 factors or ways of looking at a company, considerations that have been around since roughly 2004 was when the term was invented. And what it means is that in addition to looking at the traditional criteria of are you making money and are you growing, and the ways that analysts and investors used to look at companies, you're also looking at how are you doing in terms of other, the term that they like to apply to them is stakeholders. Not probably within Sabre, when you use the term stakeholder, it probably means internal people within the organization who are in charge of a project. But in the ESG world, it means everything from your employees to people in the community that you operate with, your customers, your suppliers, and stuff like that. So there's a lot of attention therefore paid to try to assess how well is a company doing on those criteria, not just on the financial metrics. When I first got interested in that, it was 2011. I had a focus group in Dallas on the subject. It was, at that time, it was called Socially Responsible Investing, because I thought it was interesting. And the reception was not very enthusiastic at all, to put it mildly. However, I told folks, keep an eye on this, because it is not going away. It's going to be a major trend. And I can assure you that is what it has become. It is now estimated that, just trillions and trillions of dollars are invested in accordance with ESG principles. It is very much an international phenomenon, being driven significantly from Europe, from the East Coast and the West Coast, and most every country in the world, or an awful lot of them now, have really gotten behind it. And in fact, I'm going to be talking on this subject at the EarthX conference on Saturday at Campbell Pro's event.
That's great. Do you guys have questions for Alan about any of that? Okay. Let's switch over to y'all's strengths profiles here. So what you guys share in your top 5 is learner, strategic, futuristic, and activator. So I thought that was fascinating that y'all have 4 strengths in common. And then one of you has maximizer and the other one has individualization in the top 5 strengths. When I select top 10 strengths here, we see that you guys share learner, strategic, input, futuristic, achiever, activator. And then you have a bunch of different ones here. So, Alan, when you think about your strengths, how do you feel like they have really served you in a big way? You've done some really interesting things in your life. I do feel like you've really maximized the things that you've done. But if you could help us understand how you've really taken your strengths and put them to use to get a result, that would be really helpful.
Well, big question, right? Covers a lot of ground.
And 1 or 2 examples will do.
Sure, okay. Well, what I'm doing right now is a very good example of that because I like to understand things in context. So there are many forces that are driving this whole phenomenon. Customers are driving it, bankers are driving it, investors are driving it, legislators around the world are driving it. We're relatively slow in the United States. The SEC has been expected to issue a huge rule. They're overdue on issuing it on climate change, what companies should be doing vis-a-vis climate change, et cetera. So I'm fascinated to see how this is creating a whole new set of, it's a whole new way of doing business. It's a whole new set of rules, guardrails, whatever you want to say. It's sort of a capitalism 2.0. And so that's very interesting to see where that's going and where can I help shape the evolution of that. Other instances would be, I created a pretty important biotechnology company once upon a time, and I just had a vision of what should be done, and started with a fresh legal pad and started it from scratch. Had a vision where to go with it, and just did it. Had a lot of very talented people that I was dependent upon, was able to hire, and had to rely upon them for their specialized areas of knowledge, doctors, scientists, what have you, specialized people who knew the world of marketing into diagnostic products and so on. And just had the vision and took a lot of input from them and pushed on. That would be it.
Yeah, so I could hear the futuristic with the visions that you've had, or even the interest in the future and being a part of shaping that future. And I can hear you talking about, the how do I get there? Well, that's the strategic, right? That's the plan of creating or navigating the plan of how to actually achieve it. I can hear the maximizer when you talk about working with top talent and partnering with experts in order to achieve what it is you want to achieve. And I could even hear the input part, where you said, you really seek out these experts to get the input from them.
Yes, and then sometimes I do, as it say here, become the subject matter expert. So within this ESG area, I am the man on certain kinds of legislation that are coming out of Europe, and I'm uniquely published in that field. And that, if nothing else, it gives you presumptive authority. And underline the word presumptive.
Yeah, it makes sense, because I know how you feel as an expert. You always feel like there's so much you don't know as well, and so you're always trying to learn more and more and more and more to stay completely up to date and current as an expert. But there's just so much information out there to get that you may be seen as an expert, but you may not feel like one necessarily to some degree, because there's so much more out there to learn.
That's a big point. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else that you guys want to ask Alan about when you look at his strengths? We can see that he has primarily that strategic thinking up top, and it's big picture thinking. Futuristic and strategic are really big picture. And then we get that influence with the activator, which is the let's go, let's just try it, let's just see what happens. I would say that I see that you are very experimental. When I see futuristic and learner and strategic, an activator, those are very highly experimental strengths. And then we get a little bit of that really high focus on the relationship building, the harmony part, the collaborative part, and then back to strategic thinking again with input, intellection, and then a little bit of that execution achiever at 8, but it's primarily looks like you're putting other people in place to do the work.
You got to. You're not going to get any scale if you don't have, talent. And in my experience, if you don't have first-rate talent, you're not going to have good results. And
Right.
there's a big gap between the first rate and the second rate.
How do you identify that?
Not always very well.
Trial by error, experimentation.
I was going to say, Randy, it looks like, and your other chart really highlighted it for Alan especially, where once he gets past the step 1 and 2, he should hand it off.
Yeah. That's that. If I was coaching him, that's the recommendation I would make, because 7, 8, 9, and 10, they're all here on the back end. So why not capitalize, as much as possible on that front end uniqueness that he brings, which is so strong and directive and getting, everybody in the right spots to move forward.
I think you're absolutely right, Brad. One of the things I guess I learned from my dad early on was if you hire a guy, let him do his job.
Yeah.
And get out of the way. And of course, sometimes they disappoint you and sometimes they don't. But if you've hired really, the A team, then let them make you money.
Yeah.
There's a thought. Yep.
All right, Jay, let's hop over to your profile. I would love to hear how you feel like you've really been able to leverage your strengths in what you do.
So bottom line is I love solving problems. I mean, to me, that is the most wonderful thing about everything that I've done. I put on my LinkedIn that I'm a storyteller, because what I like to do is sit down and have people tell me their problems. And then I go, okay, what are you trying to achieve? And then once I understand that, then I listen to them and say, okay, based on time, budget, any constraints they have, I go, this is how, from my point of view, I think you can do this. And then either I say, this is what I can provide, or I say, I'm not your person. You need to find somebody who does this. And so I'm very direct with, and I think Alan and I probably, have come to that same conclusion. Sometimes I'm not your guy. There are other people that really know the skills, what you need, and you should hire them. And then sometimes I'll say, I'm exactly your guy, and you can go search for other people, but you're not going to find anybody or very few people that have everything that I bring to the table that can help you get this thing going. From my point of view, I think there's a lot of people who know how to do work really, really well that they know how to do, but activating and getting things started and changing things and dynamic marketplaces and, those change agents and how do we do something new and how do we think out of the box? I'm not seeing a lot of those in corporate America, which I think is the reason why Alan and I have that entrepreneurial background as well, is because, a lot of times the execs won't listen to us. I use it as a radar. I look at people's problems and say, I'm seeing things that are outside of your radar. And they go, well, a lot of times it's like Chicken Little. Well, I can't see anything on the radar, so why should I worry about this? And I go, you're going to have to worry about it potentially, in 18 months, 24 months. I'm not 100%. I'm not a fortune teller, but based on what I'm seeing in the system and the marketplace and everything else, there's a moderate to high probability that this is something you need to prepare for. And I think today's marketplace is so reactionary and short term, and stockholder and everything else price is so short term that people aren't preparing themselves for the long run as long as they think. So that's every single thing I've ever done, whether it's animation or design strategy like I'm doing now. That's the approach I've always taken. And also I'll highlight, working with awesome people is the best thing in the world. And I love collaborating. I love working with somebody that knows everything about nothing that I do, because to me that's awesome. When I find somebody that has all my that I have weaknesses and my weaknesses are their strengths, that to me is just freaking awesome. I love that. So
Yeah, I think that's that individualization of saying, okay, what do you do and what do you do best? And let's get you seated in the right seat so that you can do what you do best all day long. And then you get to watch that magic happen, which, anybody with individualization is typically interested in psychology and just understanding how somebody ticks, how they're motivated, and then, seeing how to get the best performance out of them. So I can hear that as you talk, that's really important to you.
that's why I love these sessions,
Mhm.
because I get to see inside the head and hear from people from all these different aspects of strength finders, and get to understand those folks better. So when I meet them in the real world, I go, got it. This is how I need to communicate with you. This is this is what fires you up. This is the information you need. This is how you work. If I can understand that for the people, then I can maximize my efforts with them by setting things up in a way that they can succeed really, really well.
So if someone came to you and, Coach Jay over there and said,
Yeah.
I'm like you, Jay, and they showed you their profile and lo and behold, it looks very similar to yours. Um,
Yeah.
what kind of advice after, living all these years and having all this experience and just where you are today, what kind of advice would you give them to maximize the use of their strengths?
Pick something and stick to it. I mean, that's my biggest weakness,
Yeah.
is the fact that, there's a curse my mom said, that may you have an interesting life, may you lead an interesting life, is a Chinese curse. And I am never bored. I
Yeah.
mean, that I always have something going on. But the fact that I can do so much is kind of a curse in itself, because if I only knew how to draw, then that's all I would do. I would just draw. But because I, have all these other skills and I can do all these other things, I have so many opportunities, and I don't want to, it's like going into a candy store and just aisle and aisle and aisle of juicy, wonderful things that you want to try. And my whole life, that's been a struggle. So
So
that,
when I look at your profile and I listen to that, I go, okay, I know that ideation is really activated for you, because ideators do bounce around a lot. And
right.
especially if they have ideation and learning both, and they're very, very experimental. And then if they have activator on top of it, then they're just activating all these things, right? Start. Thank God you have achiever here at number 6, because it does mean you finish something
Oh,
um,
yeah.
that you're activating.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I put in my thing that anything I spend money on, I expect a 300% return on. So if I buy a piece of software, I expect a minimum of 300% return on that. And so anything, that I do, and for the most part, I do that. I mean, to Alan's case, when I became an Adobe Community Professional for After Effects, I was there were 6 of them in the world, and I was the only one in the United States. So that shows that achiever. When I first did Strength
And I hear
Finders, I saw,
significance too, right? I mean, if you're
yeah,
caring about being significant, if you're about being
yeah.
seen, about being the only one that has this, and then I'm going, that's a little twinge of that significance, because that's what's really important to significance, is to stand out and to be seen above the crowd.
Yeah, I don't have to worry about that. I stand out when
Yeah.
I stand out when I don't want to. I mean, my
Yeah.
sister told me this. I'm the loudest silent person she's ever met in her
Yeah.
life, meaning I can sit in a room and
My
people
cats would love
know I'm
you.
there. Yeah. So, but anyways, yeah, I mean, I guess, I hope that answers that.
Yeah. Alan, what about you? If you could help yourself, all those years ago, what would you have told yourself to focus on?
Well, I guess I would say know yourself and don't try to live according to what you think other people expect of you.
Mm-hmm.
And we're human beings, so mom gave you things. She may not have said, "I want you to do this or that," but you so brought it in. Other people, influential people in your life, your peers, what have you, and maybe that just really wasn't you. Like I see all these parents, they want to get their kids into Harvard, but what if Harvard isn't the right school for the kid? Are they doing it for the kid, or are they doing it for their prestige?
Sure.
Uh, so I would say know yourself and have a lot of conversations with people so you get to know what are what's really there as opposed to what you think might be there in terms of an area of opportunity. I have a great respect for experience within a specific field.
Mm-hmm.
I have a very broad background, but I have huge respect for people who have really good in-depth knowledge of their particular area. And so I would say that's it. I would say also, you know, uh, do something that you really, where you really feel it's a good thing for the world. It's a good thing for you. A lot of, say, the practice of law, especially if you're in a big law firm, it's very much all about the money.
Mm.
And it has very little or damn near nothing to do with justice, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so that can be a little bit, sometimes you're asking yourself, am I really on the side of the angels here, or am I just on the side of the paycheck?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that can be really discouraging, especially if you went into a particular field thinking that it was going to be one way and you were thinking that you were going to impact the world a certain way. And then you just realize, oh, wow, this is not the arena I thought I'd be playing in.
So
And how?
well, go ahead. Yeah, I was just gonna say that resonates with me too. I really don't like being in places where I can't help people have impact and move the needle forward. If I'm in a place where what I'm doing doesn't have, like you said, significance or value or help make people life better, then that's not a place I want to be.
You know, I've worked with obviously thousands of people from on a coaching level alone. And the number one thing I hear from people is that they want to have an impact. And so then we have to ask the question, how do you want to have an impact? And what does having an impact mean to you specifically? Because that's where it gets interesting. Like one person feels like, growing the garden of vegetables that feeds a community is the most impactful thing that they could be doing, where another person feels like joining the police force and serving the community around violence is the most important thing they could be doing. Others are, I'm going to, create these financial statements for this organization to make sure it stays, in compliance. And if I keep the company in compliance, all these people will keep their jobs and we'll be able to, stay afloat. And they feel like that's really the most important thing they could be doing to serve the community. So when you think about, Jay, like what is it that you feel is one of the most important ways to serve your community?
So I'm reading a book called Genius, well, a bunch of books called Genius, and one of the authors has said there's emotional moment that happens in your lives, and we tend to be drawn towards that when we're moving forward. And I think when I found out I was dyslexic and I had teachers look at me with a very disappointed like thing that left a big uh mark on me. And what I have found value in is helping smart people that have big obstacles that I know can achieve greatness, helping them overcome those obstacles through experience or learning or other things. That to me is impactful, because I had a student who was a fine artist who went to school at UT, and she was working in an oil company, and she showed me some of her paintings, and she was devaluing her work. And I told her, I said, you can make a lot of money with these things. And she goes, really? And then she sold them at work, and she wound up making $3,000 or $4,000 with her paintings, and they had just been sitting in her room, right, doing nothing. So to me, that was just one example of what I love. That what I think I was put on the planet to do is help people achieve their dreams and help people find that hidden value that is deep inside them and they know exists, but they don't know how to activate it. They don't, it's that activator. They don't know how to just do something that starts that process that gets them to be able to do that thing that they deep inside of them, I know they want to do and haven't.
Yeah. So thank you for the answer, and such an authentic, honest answer, because it allows us to see it's strengths is a piece of this, but there's also experience. There's also what happened individually to you. What was your experience that comes into play and that shapes us on how we feel compelled to impact the community and the world. And that was such a good example of, here are my strengths. I love to teach. I love to help people see how they can make money. You know, you can hear the strategic and the futuristic and the learner, and the fact that you saw her artwork, right? That creative side. But then there's also this personal journey of, I really struggled with this, and I would love to help people unleash their inner talents by getting rid of the obstacles that are you know, for you, it's probably easy to see what those obstacles are, and easy for you to see how to help them remove them so that they can really experience the full potential that they have inside them.
And to your point, if I could only do that with myself better. So,
Yeah, but
right.
we cannot do that with ourselves without help, just like she couldn't do it without you. And that's important for all of us to recognize. We all need partnerships. We all need friends. We all need coaches. We all need people that can see our potential and help us get to where we need to go. We just cannot always see it within ourselves.
Yeah.
I would say that is probably the thing I enjoy the most, is seeing people realize their potential. So I took a class once in a church, and the person had a system for helping you figure out your personality. And she wound up coming up with, for me, it was, quote, creative, encouraging leadership. I like seeing people, become what is within them, what they can become. I hate seeing people kind of just being stuck.
Yeah, it's that one line of people leading lives of quiet desperation.
Right.
Right. To me, when I read that, and I forget who said it, but it's resonated with me my entire life. If there's an artist who I think is really talented, who could lead a life as an artist, I want to be able to help them. Right. If there's super talented people that I know have gifts that the world is not benefiting from, if I can help them get to a place where they can share those gifts, that means that in a small way, I help make the world a better place.
So let me do the comparison so you guys, we can slap you up next to each other. What does everybody see? And if you have questions for these guys, please jump in and ask. That's what they're here for today, is to answer any questions you have around who they are, what they do, and their strength combinations. So I guess one thing that, so we see ideation shows up top 15 for both of you. We see input shows up. But I noticed that competitiveness is much higher for Alan than for Jay. And competitiveness is, I need to be number one. Whatever we're doing needs to be number one. But where Jay might come out with a similar result is that significance, right? I need to do something really, really big, really significant, really impactful.
Yeah, I'll throw this to Alan really quick, but people misinterpret me all the time. They think and now I can be really, really, really competitive when I want to be. I'm just not naturally. But people always assume I'm competing with people, and most often I'm not. I'm just like,
I've
I
never
don't care.
seen that. I've never noticed that in you or picked up on that, but
Yeah.
I'm kind of in tune to
Yeah,
the
yeah.
differences, but I've never thought you were competitive.
No, I always want to collaborate.
With himself.
Say again?
Jay is very competitive with himself.
Yeah. and learners are typically improvers. They, it's this continuous improvement. So if you have activator, then you're activating that self-improvement all the time. Does that sound familiar to you guys?
Yeah. Not that I have a library behind me to remind me of what I don't know.
Were you gonna say something, Alan?
Just nodding my head.
Okay. Yeah. We see input in both of y'all. What
Yeah,
else?
Brandy,
Harmony is a little different. Yeah.
I'm totally lost in what you're doing. I had the screen the piece that I got from StrengthsFinder printout looks nothing like your chart, and I can't make heads or tail of what you're doing here. So
Yeah.
can you please explain?
Yeah.
Otherwise,
so the strengths is completely individual to from one person to the next. Everybody's ordering is completely different. And so we would have to look at yours and your order in order to really understand you. And you may not be anything like these two gentlemen and we're just going through their two profiles today. We do this every Monday. We go through some people's profiles to really sink our teeth into how the strengths look in real life. And so that we can start to understand this session is just to understand strengths in depth. It's not a job seeking networking group that we do on Mondays. It's called the Strengthology Speaker Series, which is just understanding strengths.
well, what I'm saying is, when I did the StrengthsFinder and printed out what they did, it's nothing that looks like any of the charts that you have there. So I'm trying to figure out where did these charts and all these strengths come from that's different from the StrengthsFinder program.
What were your strengths?
Learner, deliberative, correctiveness, input, and futuristic.
Okay, good. So number one, you took the right assessment of what we're talking about today. I had to double check that. Number two, your learner, for example, is in Alan and Jay's profile. So when they're talking about what learner means to them, that should resonate pretty well with you. To answer your other question, the tool that I'm using is called Strengthology. It's not the Gallup CliftonStrengths tool. And so what these gentlemen did is they signed up for Strengthology and they put their strengths into the tool, which then spit out some charts for them, which is what you're seeing on the screen today.
And to help him, Brandy, these are proprietary for you. They're not Gallup's.
Correct.
That's the missing link for this gentleman is they're your proprietary tools.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Okay, because this is my first time, listening to your webinar.
Uh-huh.
But he can get it. Yeah,
I was kind of lost. So
Well, thank you for joining. I'm sorry we lost you. Does that clarify everything that you had questions on?
yeah, so it helps answer them. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so let's look at this harmony. Alan has harmony really strong, which is very unusual when you have strategic. Usually strategic and harmony are at opposite ends of the spectrum. Usually strategic people are not really like conflict doesn't bother them at all. And so I know that Alan, conflict doesn't bother you either, but the harmony is so strong that you probably really appreciate a non-conflict environment. it, not that you have to have it, but it's probably appreciated when it is harmonic and collaborative because the harmony is so high, where Jay isn't really focused on that. He can just be in a very crazy environment and not even think twice about it. Does that sound right for both of you?
One of the reasons why I am no longer practicing law, once you become a member of the bar and you have experience, you always think like a lawyer, at least to some extent. Hopefully you can not be boxed in by the limitations, but at least you do that. One of the real problems, I think, with the legal profession is it's predicated on controversy. Everything is thought through in terms of me versus you. I'm drafting a contract, it's me versus you.
Sure.
In a divorce, it's me versus you. It's not trying to come up with a constructive resolution or what have you. And I just think that's, terribly wasteful, and I just don't like it. And, I get a bad vibe from it. And I get a good vibe when I see people working together harmoniously to a common goal.
Yeah.
So, that's, and if you're going to scale up, I appreciate individual achievement. I like to write songs, that's kind of an individual thing to do, but you need help along the way from people who help you put it down into a musical score, to other people who help accompaniment, sound engineer, and all of that kind of stuff. So it's, at the end of the day, kind of, we're all in this together, and so harmony matters a lot to me. And I think that's for me, that's part of an element of success. Are you able to have an organization, accomplish? It's going to accomplish it when the parts are in harmony.
Yeah, and when people are collaborating together is what I hear you saying, because
Yes.
harmony is really good at getting groups of people together, aligned, in agreement, and working towards a common goal. When I look at your profile, both of you, I feel like there's a lot of like product management type strengths in your profiles of leading something, into the future, a new product, a new service, a new something, finding that strategic path of how to get there, all the learning that has to be done, and all the teaching that has to be done, and all the coaching that has to be done to get everybody up to speed and on board towards this future direction. And then the activation of people, getting them going, and that influence, that little push and nudge. But then you also both have a little bit of this relationship building through the harmony and the individualization. And I feel like, Alan, like for sure what you're doing is definitely like forming a new quote unquote product for the future. And Jay, I also I've seen that in action from you, that you really contribute towards the development of future products. Does that resonate with you when I talk about that?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, I'm curious. I forgot where harmony is on mine. It's like way
It's
down
at the
below like
bottom.
that.
Yeah, it's 30.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Yeah. So it's so interesting that sits down to like 32. Yet what you're describing is my methodology. So I don't know if I truly don't, it's not like I'm innately harmonious. I just know in order to get things done, these are the things that need to occur.
Sure.
So I do these things because if I don't do these things, they don't get done. So
which just means you have a priority around getting things done. So you've learned how to do that successfully with a group of people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because if people aren't aligned, if they don't understand the big picture, if you're not listening to what they need and developing to what Alan said is a win-win, right? How is everybody winning from this? And you need to communicate that. That's how you get people on board to actually do something. If they don't feel there's something in it for them at some level, things don't get done.
There's let's be clear. Getting the goal accomplished is, for me, job number one.
Yeah.
And if there's a team member who is not going to operate as a team member, who's going to be a pain in the what, who is just, disruptive, just can't work with the other groups, then frankly, that person has to go. So, you don't have to try to sacrifice the good of the firm to meet the, peculiarities of that particular, let's say, disruptive or non-harmonious person. So sometimes, that has to be handled, and hopefully in a way that's, not brutal, but sometimes inevitably that's going to feel brutal to the person who is not being accepted on a continuing basis.
And it may feel that way, but it's also when you're maximizing, whatever it is that you are trying to achieve at that time with a group of people, it may also be like, look, you're just, to the person, you're not the right fit for this. This is actually not even the right thing for you to be a part of this. And we can see that because we're trying to achieve something, and what we're trying to achieve needs this and this and this and this and that. And you're bringing this other thing. And that's just, it's not maximized for the team, and it's not maximized for you. So let's get you doing this other thing somewhere else at some other company where you really will fit in, and you'll be aligned with what they're trying to do, and you'll be able to offer your skill set to that organization. I always look at it that way anyway. I don't know if you guys do, but I look at the sort of win-win, even if we have to make some pretty tough changes.
Where I've seen that is you have a high-level executive who comes in and wants to lead in a way that doesn't match what everybody else in the room is wanting to do. And to me, sometimes they just need to let the people do their job. Like Alan said, if you fired somebody to do a job, let them freaking do their job. Tell them the direction that and the results that you want, and then back off. And I think sometimes there are certain executives that feel they have to put their fingers and direct and micromanage and do all these things, and they're really just not being helpful. They're actually causing delays and people to get really anxious and fear their job. And that just, to me, is creating an unhealthy environment where people are not going to be able to achieve things as best they can. So anyways.
Jay, have you thought about becoming one of those high-level executives?
So interestingly enough, I think one of my weaknesses, talking about strengths, is managing. I am so much better leader than I am a manager. I mean, I can sit there and say, man, this is what you need to do. You have these strengths, dude, you can do this. And then let somebody else manage them on the day-to-day, because it's so tiring for me personally
let me
to hear
interrupt.
those
Let me
managing
interrupt.
things.
Let me interrupt really quick, because as an executive, a high-level executive, you manage leaders. You don't manage.
That's true.
You don't manage people who need micromanaged.
That's true. Yeah. So no, I haven't really thought about it that way. You're right, though.
Because if you have the sight for what somebody else should be doing, and you're very passionate about it because you see how it needs to be done, sometimes you need to fill those shoes yourself.
Sure. No, I've had to do that. Yeah.
I would have thought that the creative and the managerial tend to be different and often in conflict. And if you're a creative person, the routine of management will drag you down. You probably won't do a good job of it. I am one of those people. If you asked me to keep your books, it would be not a very pretty picture eventually, because I probably could force myself to do it, but I wouldn't do it, with any sense of joy. And there'd be a lot of people who could do it a whole lot better, to be faster, more efficiently, or whatever it is. So I'm not into, routine. And I think highly creative people tend to not be kind of routine. And so that's the trick of it. Like if you're an entrepreneur and you found a company, there comes a time you need to hand it off probably to a management team, unless you're one of those rare guys or women who can do both.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. I'm good at getting people aligned and saying this is a cool opportunity, and if we set this up right, people can make a lot of money and do things. And then you're right, I want to hand it over to really competent people who they just love doing that stuff on a day to day. Yeah, that's probably where I would sit. That's probably
Okay.
where Alan, you and I are the same in that respect.
Cash in your options and take a month off in the Bahamas.
See, that's what I need to do.
Oh my
I
God,
have
I
not
need to work
done
with
that.
Alan.
Yeah, I know. That's what I need. Alan, you and I are going to be having a lot more conversations because I like this vision you have.
Jay, are you wearing a Bahama shirt over there? Are you ready?
Man, you know, I thought about whether I should change to be more business-like, but I said, you know, this is really what I wear because every day, starting in May, I have a big screen that I put up a beach
Yeah.
on my thing, and that's what I do. And we only live one life, so if every day is not at some way you're enjoying it or try to enjoy, then are you really living, right? And just not dying. I read that was a saying, are you really living or just not dying?
Yeah.
And or that other one that everybody works really hard to arrive safely at death.
Yeah.
Right? That's really morbid, but you know what kind of life do you want to lead at the end of this thing? Do you want to go for it? So that's my where I am right now, why I love you and doing this, Brandy, because you're helping people find their genius. You're helping people understand where they need to be putting their efforts for their maximum output, right?
And to feel at their best. Absolutely.
100%. Yeah.
And does
I ran across a quote the other day. Don't die with most of your music still inside you.
Yeah. Yeah. Share it. Let us all hear it.
No, 100%. And I need to be thinking more big picture. I need to be thinking more big picture, Brandy, because you're right. I probably could lead a team of really good maximizers to kick ass results.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What other questions did the participants on the call have for our guests today?
We invited a whole bunch of introverts, except Alex. Alex is probably practicing being quiet. So Alex, now's your time. You got 2 minutes.
We're all practicing being
I don't know
quiet.
if anybody wants to hear. I would, yes, Jay's right. I sometimes have trouble not talking, but I like to hear other people talk. It's like an anxious, I don't know. Some people like go inward when they're like anxious in social situations, but like I'm kind of like Jay, like you can't not notice Jay in a room. I have been told more than once, like, oh, Alex, like we hear you before we see you. But I don't know. I was just sort of kind of pondering, or maybe it's more a question for you, Brandy. I just find it really fascinating how similar Jay and Alan are, but on paper, if you just look at like if you just are looking at their LinkedIn, for instance, like it seems like two very different people.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so much that goes into a human.
Right.
Your upbringing. Did you have trauma? Did you have, good, safe household with two parents? What experiences did you have with your friends socially? What were your interests? Just because you're a futurist, it doesn't tell us what each person is interested in. It just tells us it has something to do with the future. And so there's so much to being a human that's not on paper right now, that's not in this assessment. What I like about this assessment is it gets us to a point where we can have a very good discussion about that. And it focuses on people's strengths rather than a place of weakness. And it also focuses on how those neural pathways in the brain are naturally wired. And so it helps me as a coach understand how someone's going to respond if I speak to them in a certain way, or I use certain words, or we're focused on a particular thing. And it also then allows me to go, okay, if you're wired like this and you respond to this and you like these things, you have this experience and this is where you're at in your life, you're this age, then have you thought about doing this, or are you willing to do this, or have you done that? but I can also cater it in a way that works for them. I'm not asking them to do things that like when you hear Alan say, don't put me into like a finance book, you would never ask that of him, right? You would never say, oh, in order for us to lay out how we need to work together, we're going to open up a spreadsheet. He's just already gone by the point you say that. He's like, I want to work more creatively. And I want to, and so we'd have to ask, do you like whiteboards? Do you like to discuss things, or do you some people like to go and think about it themselves and then bring their thoughts back? And so there's just there's some assumptions we can kind of make, but then we also, as you guys are seeing, we have to ask each individual, how does this work for you, right? This strength tends to do these things, but because you have this particular pairing of strengths, and because they're in this particular order, and because you've had all this other experience in life, it changes how it looks for them, but it opens up the dialogue and the communication to be able to really get down into the nitty-gritty of it in a positive way.
Yeah, it's very fascinating to me. I mean, I'm a lover of like psychology and human behavior and all of those things. So it's just very interesting to me, but it also makes me step back and think, oh, wait, like what is like, there's people behind like the LinkedIn pages and it kind of makes me wonder.
And LinkedIn,
why is LinkedIn like, or why are we?
But I also think on LinkedIn, we need 10 profiles.
Yeah.
I have my business analyst profile. I have my musician profile. I have, my mathematics career that I had at one point. I have my strengthology. Like, we all have so many complex facets to us that we never want to discredit that and just lump somebody into a certain thing. If we're really willing to truly get to know them, people are very complicated.
Alan, I'm kind of curious. I know Jay pretty well. Jay and I've spent lots of time. Jay's been a huge like motivator for me and mentor. Like I appreciate Jay very much. He knows that too, but more than he probably knows. It's funny because all of the hearing you talk to him, I'm like laughing to myself here because you nailed it. But Alan, I don't know you, and I'm kind of really fascinated in some weird way. Like you have this highly like creative, that probably came out wrong, but I'll make a circle back around. Sometimes like I speak and then think, and like the words come out, but you can't put them back in. But that's just my neurodivergence. So I just have learned to, appreciate it, I guess, or accept it maybe. But no, you are a highly creative individual, but I guess it's unique, I guess, to see somebody that has that. You just seem to be very left and right brained, I guess is what I'm kind of saying. It's how have you been able to kind of balance the two and find such success? And like, it sounds like in a way that's meaningful to you, like you haven't sacrificed success for like your values and, feeling accomplished and, like morally, like what you're doing was the right thing. Like how have you managed to do that?
There's nothing like experience that helps, right? And we all learn from our mistakes, and we observe what happens to others and what they cause to bring about. I think I probably do have a balance between right and left brain, it's a happier thing when you're allowing that creative, artistic side of you come to work, or at least don't let it be part of your life, and don't ignore it. I think that shuts down a part of you, and there's a wonderful book, I was mentioning it to Jay, by a guy named Daniel Pink. I think Jay already knew it, called A Whole Other Brain. And it's all about activating your artistic as whatever. The author says that we've moved past the information economy now to a time when it's the creative economy, and that the the new master of business administration is the master of fine arts. And so I recommend the book very much. It has a wonderful quote in there. In India, one of the big software companies has a sign outside that says, "Trespassers will be recruited."
I love it. I love it.
So, allow a little time for that, right? And allow it to work. And it's interesting how let your intuition happen. I would like to see an interesting study done. I'd like to see my church get involved with promoting this on the whole process of creativity. Where does it come from? Because, you ask songwriters, I can testify from my personal experience, where did that song come from? Sometimes it comes just like that. The Music, The Rose, is a fabulous song. It came to her in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And sometimes you wake up and the song is almost fully formed in your mind when you woke up. Where did that come from? What's going on there?
There's another book that I read about genius, and it says that genius is kind of like a genie. It has ideas, and it goes through the universe looking for souls to bring it to life.
I'll buy that.
And if you are that person, it will stay with you. And if you're not that person, it'll stay with you for a little while and then go find somebody else. And that's that thing of saying, man, I had that idea 4 years ago, but you never did anything with it. So it moved on and found somebody who was going to do something with that, and they brought it to life. So that's that kind of inspiration. And I've thought that too, from time to time in my life. I've had ideas and not moved on it. And then 10 years later, I see somebody has that as their business.
So I'm going to send you guys a podcast from a neuroscience guy. Gosh, his name is escaping me at the moment, but he interviewed Rick Rubin, who I'm sure you guys are both very familiar with, and interviewed him around his creative process. So it's a cool dichotomy podcast where you've got creativity on one side of the table and then complete logic neuroscience on the other side of the table. And it's just really enjoyable to listen to the two different perspectives and to dig into Rick Rubin's brain a little bit and his practices of how he stimulates creativity. So I'll send that to you both after this for your enjoyment. It's long, it's 2.5 hours long, but if you just have a couple of nice walks, it's really great to listen to. Oh, the neuroscientist is Huberman. What's that guy's first name? Something Huberman. So I'm going to wrap us up because we're right at that hour now. I know we got started a little late due to me, but thank you both for joining today and sharing with us your perspective. It was awesome hearing a little bit about both of you and getting to know both of you better. And thank you for the questions and the comments as well that the rest of the crew brought. I really appreciate everybody's time today.
And I want to thank everybody from my side for taking the time to hang out. I'm going to do a plug for Brandy, that if this is interesting to you and you haven't dug into this, I think there's real value for you reaching out to Brandy and letting her kind of guide you into maybe finding some things about yourself you didn't know. So, and that's unsolicited. I'm literally saying that I think that Brandy can help if you're trying to figure things out for yourself. Brandy has some tools and techniques that I think can give you maybe some insights you're looking for.
I will.
Motion.
Okay,
Yeah.
and I'll second your second.
Thank you both.
Okay.
Okay, everyone have a wonderful week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you all
Good to
very
see
much.
y'all.
Bye-bye.